Hello everyone, welcome back. This is a story from Her Silent Revenge, and it has taken a turn you absolutely didn't expect. Let's begin.
After inheriting $62 million, a tragic accident left me in a coma for 6 months. I awoke to a nightmare my sister had abandoned me. Hospital staff tortured me daily, and my body was being ravaged. Everyone believed I would be a vegetable forever. But while they celebrated stealing my fortune, I was documenting every single crime. While they mocked my broken body, I was building my record. While they thought I was hopeless, I was planning their utter downfall. I'm so glad you're here with me. Tell me, what city are you listening from right now? Drop a comment so we can connect across the miles. Quick note, while some details are fictionalized to enhance the storytelling. The powerful message about rising from betrayal and reclaiming your life, that's something I genuinely hope will resonate with you. The beeping was the first sound that told me I was still alive. Steady, rhythmic, insistent. Each pulse from the heart monitor echoed through the fog in my head, dragging me back from wherever I'd been floating. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt weighted like someone had replaced them with lead. When I finally managed to crack them open, fluorescent light stabbed into my retinas, harsh and unforgiving. Everything hurt. That was my second realization. Not the sharp, localized pain of a cut or bruise, but a deep, radiating agony that seemed to originate from my legs and spread upward through my spine like poison through veins. I tried to shift my weight to find a position that didn't feel like my bones were grinding against each other, but my lower body refused to respond. Panic squeezed my chest. I couldn't feel my legs. Or rather, I could feel them. The pain made sure of that, but I couldn't move them. My fingers fumbled across the thin hospital blanket, searching for the call button I knew should be clipped somewhere near my shoulder. Found it. Pressed it. Nothing. Pressed again, harder. Still nothing. The little red light that should have signaled the nurse's station stayed dark. Broken or disconnected or Ms. Foster? The voice came from the doorway, flat and professional. A woman in navy scrubs entered without waiting for an invitation, her eyes fixed on a tablet instead of my face. Mid-40s dark hair pulled into a severe bun, the kind of exhaustion in her expression that spoke of too many double shifts and not enough coffee. Her name tag read, Linda R.N. "You're finally awake," she said, tapping something on the screen. "We need to discuss your discharge plan because your insurance company has flagged some concerns about coverage." I tried to speak. My throat felt like I'd swallowed broken glass. Where? The word came out as a raspy whisper that barely qualified as sound. Nurse Linda sighed the kind of sigh that suggested I was the 10th inconvenient patient she'd dealt with this morning, and it wasn't even 9 a.m. yet. She moved to the foot of my bed, finally making eye contact. "You're at Northwestern Memorial. You were in a car accident 2 days ago. Severe injuries to both legs, multiple fractures, head trauma. You've been unconscious since they brought you in. 2 days. The information felt impossible to process. The last thing I remembered. The rain. God, the rain had been coming down in sheets, turning Lakeshore Drive into a river of taillights and brake lights. I'd been driving too fast, too excited, my hands trembling on the steering wheel, not from fear, but from joy. The meeting with James Callahan. Charles Ashford's lawyer played in my mind like a movie. The mahogany office, the leather chair, the will being read in that measured legal tone. To my dear friend and archivist, Elena Foster, I leave the sum of $62 million and controlling interest in Ashford Enterprises. $62 million. I'd cried right there in that office, tears of disbelief streaming down my face, while James had smiled kindly and handed me tissues. Charles, kind, grumpy, lonely. Charles, who I'd brought peppermint tea to every Tuesday for 5 years, had left me everything. I'd been rushing home to call my sister, to tell Walsh the news, to share it with her, because that's what family did, wasn't it? Share miracles. Then the truck had swerved into my lane. "Your sister," I croaked, forcing the words past the sandpaper in my throat. "Walsh, my sister. Has she been here?" Something flickered across Nurse Linda's face. Not quite sympathy, but close. She pulled up a chair and sat, which felt ominous. Nurses didn't sit down to deliver good news. "Miss Foster, I need to be direct with you about your treatment plan." She consulted her tablet again, as if reading from a script. You sustained bilateral tibial and fibular fractures, along with damage to the surrounding soft tissue. The attending physician recommended immediate reconstructive surgery, titanium rods, bone grafts, the works. It's the gold standard for this type of injury. With that procedure, you'd have about an 85% chance of regaining full mobility. Hope flared in my chest. Okay, when do we... Your sister declined that option. The hope died so quickly I almost heard it. What? Nurse Linda's expression remained professionally neutral. Walsh Foster is listed as your medical power of attorney. You signed those papers about 3 years ago during a routine estate planning session. It's all legally documented. She arrived yesterday morning while you were still unconscious and reviewed the treatment options with Dr. Patterson. My mind was reeling. I don't understand. Why would she... She opted for the conservative approach, standard casting pain management and eventual physical therapy. It's less invasive, which means lower risk of surgical complications. Nurse Linda paused, and I could see her choosing her next words carefully. It's also significantly less expensive. The reconstructive surgery would have cost approximately $40,000 out of pocket after insurance. The casting method costs about $5,000. $35,000. Walsh had chosen to save $35,000. But what does that mean for... I couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't make myself ask the question I already knew the answer to. Nurse Linda did it for me. Without the reconstructive surgery, your chances of walking normally again are less than 15%. You'll likely require a cane or wheelchair for the rest of your life. I'm sorry. The room tilted, or maybe I did. The beeping from the heart monitor accelerated, matching the sudden frantic rhythm of my pulse. This couldn't be real. Walsh wouldn't do this to me. There had to be a mistake, a miscommunication. Walsh was my sister. She'd protected me from bullies in middle school. She'd held me when our mother died. She wouldn't. I need to talk to her. I managed. There's been a mistake. She didn't understand what the doctor was saying. She'll fix this. The pain medication drip must have kicked in again because the edges of my vision started to soften and blur. I fought against it, tried to keep my eyes open, but exhaustion was pulling me down like an anchor. Ms. Foster, I really think you should rest. Call Walsh, I whispered. Please. She's my sister. She'll fix this. She has to. Nurse Linda stood tucking the tablet under her arm. Her face was carefully blank, the expression of someone who'd seen this movie before and knew how it ended. I'll note your request in your chart. She left without another word, her footsteps fading down the hallway. I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the small holes in the acoustic paneling, because focusing on anything was better than thinking about what I'd just been told. 15%, wheelchair, cane, the rest of my life. No, there was an explanation. Walsh would come back. She'd tell me this was all a horrible misunderstanding. She'd authorize the surgery and everything would be fine. We'd laugh about it later once I was healed and walking, and the morphine pulled me under before I could finish the thought. But even as I drifted away, one phrase kept echoing through my fading consciousness, $35,000. My sister had decided I wasn't worth $35,000. I didn't know then that Walsh had already decided I wouldn't walk again. And that was just the beginning. 4 hours later, the door opened. But the woman who walked in wasn't the sister I remembered. Walsh Foster looked like she'd stepped off a magazine cover charcoal Armani blazer, silk blouse hair swept into a perfect chignon. Diamond studs glinted at her ears. The contrast between us was obscene, her and designer wear me in a faded hospital gown, broken and helpless. Walsh. Relief flooded through me. Thank God, there's been a mistake about the surgery. The nurse said you declined the reconstructive procedure, but I know you didn't understand. There's no mistake. Her voice was ice. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. What? She stepped further into the room, closing the door with a soft click. She didn't rush to my bedside, didn't take my hand. She examined the room like someone touring a property they'd never buy. I understood the doctor perfectly. Walsh said, turning those cold hazel eyes on me. I chose the cheaper option because you don't need expensive surgery. You need to learn your place. The words made no sense. Walsh, I don't understand. There's the inheritance. Charles Ashford left me $62 million. I was coming home to tell you. We can pay for the surgery. I already know about Charles's will. The statement hit like a physical blow. What? Walsh's lips curved into something that might have been a smile. I hired a private investigator 3 weeks ago when Charles went into hospice. I knew the old man was dying and I knew you'd been his favorite little pet. So I paid someone to monitor the lawyer's office. She pulled out her phone showing surveillance photos. I knew about the inheritance before you walked into that office yesterday. My mind reeled. Then why didn't you say something? Because I wanted to see if you'd tell me first. If for once you'd think of me instead of assuming everyone would just hand you whatever you wanted. She pocketed the phone. But no, you got in your car probably planning how you'd graciously share your windfall like some beneficent queen tossing coins to peasants. That's not what I was thinking. You're my sister. I love you. I wanted us both. You love me. Walsh laughed harsh brittle. You pity me. You've always pitied me. The older sister who worked twice as hard for half the recognition. Pretty, but not beautiful. Smart, but not brilliant. Never quite enough. She moved closer, hands trembling slightly, the only sign of emotion beneath that frozen surface. Do you know what people say about us? Mom's friend said, Walsh is confident, but Elena has such a kind heart. The guidance counselor told me to learn from your natural empathy. And Charles Ashford, a man I visited twice professionally, looked right past me and chose you, the quiet archivist who brought him tea. I didn't know you'd visited him. Of course he never mentioned me because I didn't matter. But you, with your shy smile and genuine interest in dusty documents, you were special. You always are. I tried to reach for her hand. Walsh, please. I never meant... She jerked away like I'd tried to burn her. Don't. She pulled a manila folder from her handbag and threw it onto my lap. Your medical power of attorney paperwork. You signed it 3 years ago. Remember you said you trusted me more than anyone. I stared at my own signature. That trust was your first mistake. Walsh continued, voice cold and clinical again. Your second mistake was getting in that car before telling me about the money. Your third, assuming I would ever forgive you for being someone people love without even trying. My throat closed. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm your healthcare decision maker now, and I've decided you don't need a $40,000 surgery that will have you walking in heels within 6 months. You need a $5,000 casting that will leave you dependent, limited, humble. She leaned close, her Chanel perfume suffocating. I want you to feel what I've felt my entire life, Elena. Inadequate, secondary, less than. Tears burned my eyes. You're my sister, and you're my burden. Walsh straightened, smoothing her blazer. The accident was your bad timing, but what happens next, that's all mine. She reached over and plucked the call button from my bed rail. I watched helplessly as she placed it on the counter across the room, just far enough that I couldn't reach it even if I could move. Walsh, please. But she was already at the door heels, clicking sharply. She paused, glancing back. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, regret, guilt. Then it was gone, replaced by that terrible coldness. You'll thank me eventually, she said. Wealth looks different when you're looking up at it from the ground. The door closed. I lay there staring at the call button. I couldn't reach the POA papers scattered across my blanket, the empty doorway. My chest ached with something worse than the pain in my legs, the crushing realization that the person I'd loved most had just systematically destroyed me. And the most terrifying part, she'd done it with the calm precision of someone who'd been planning it for a very long time. I thought that was the worst of it. I thought surely once she calmed down, my sister would come back, the sister who used to protect me. I was wrong. The second blow came with a smartphone camera and a practiced smile. I hadn't eaten since the accident. A food tray had appeared at some point while I'd been dozing after Walsh left, but a nurse, not Linda, someone I didn't recognize, had removed it before I could even lift my head to see what was on it. Dietary restrictions, she'd muttered, not meeting my eyes. I suspected Walsh had left instructions about that too. Keep me weak, keep me dependent. The door opened again as twilight painted the room in shades of gray. I tensed, expecting Walsh to return for another round of psychological warfare. Instead, a man stepped inside, tall, lean, wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly salary used to. He had the kind of angular jawline that photographed well and artfully tousled brown hair that looked effortless, but definitely wasn't. Trevor Mason, Walsh's husband of 2 years. I'd met him exactly 3 times, once at their engagement party, once at their wedding, and once at an awkward holiday dinner where he'd spent most of the meal on his phone. He'd always struck me as pleasant but hollow, the kind of person who smiled a lot without actually expressing joy. Walsh had met him at some finance networking event and they'd gotten married within 6 months. I'd thought it was romantic at the time. Now I wondered what Walsh had promised him. Elena. He approached the bed but kept his distance, like my brokenness might be contagious. His eyes darted around the room to the monitors, the IV stand, the window, anywhere but my face. Walsh asked me to check on you. There was something off about his tone. Rehearsed. Like he'd practiced the line in the car on the way over. Trevor, I need to talk to Walsh again. There's been a terrible misunderstanding about... He pulled out his phone. The movement was smooth, automatic. He didn't ask permission. Didn't warn me. Just opened the camera app and angled it toward my bed, his face transforming in an instant. The uncomfortable man disappeared. In his place stood someone bright, energetic, performative. Hey everyone, it's Trevor. His voice pitched up half an octave, taking on that distinctive YouTuber cadence that made everything sound like breaking news. I'm here at Northwestern Memorial Hospital visiting Elena, that's my wife Walsh's younger sister. She's been through so much, you guys. The camera swung toward me. I saw myself in the reverse image on his screen, hair matted and greasy hospital gown hanging off one shoulder, the bruising on my face, a deep purple against pale skin. Tears I hadn't realized were falling tracked down my cheeks. Trevor, please don't... But he kept recording, narrating over my weak protest like I was part of the scenery instead of a person. We wanted everyone to know that despite some family differences, and we're not going to get into that drama right now, this isn't the time. Walsh is being incredibly generous. She's covering all of Elena's medical expenses out of pocket, making sure she has the best care possible, really stepping up as the older sister. That's not true. I managed my voice cracking. She refused the surgery. Trevor zoomed in the angle, making my desperate expression look unhinged. Crazy. The camera caught the wild movement of my hands as I tried to reach for him to grab the phone to make him stop. The pain medication is really strong, Trevor said to his invisible audience, his voice dropping into that sympathetic but condescending tone people use when talking about someone who isn't quite right in the head. The doctor said she'd be confused for a while. It's really heartbreaking to see, but we're here for her, supporting her through this difficult time. He turned the camera back to himself, arranging his features into an expression of noble suffering. Please keep Elena in your prayers, guys. And if you want to help, because we know so many of you have big hearts, I've set up a GoFundMe to assist with her ongoing medical costs. Link is in my bio. Every little bit helps. Even just sharing this video means the world. Elena needs all the support she can get right now. A GoFundMe. He'd created a fundraising page in my name, probably filled with carefully worded lies about how Walsh was heroically supporting her tragic sister, collecting donations from strangers' sympathy while I lay here unable to even feed myself. The rage that surged through me gave me strength I didn't know I still had. I lunged forward, or tried to. My upper body barely lifted off the mattress before pain exploded through my spine, and I collapsed back with a gasp that probably looked like a sob on camera. Perfect footage. The broken sister, pathetic and helpless. Trevor lowered the phone, his performative smile dropping away to reveal that uncomfortable expression again. He looked at me for just a second, really looked, and I saw guilt flicker across his face. Then he blinked and it was gone, replaced by blank detachment. I should go, he mumbled, already backing toward the door. Walsh is waiting. He slipped into the hallway, but the door didn't close completely. Through the 6-inch gap, I heard voices. Posted. Trevor's voice stripped of its camera-ready enthusiasm. It's already getting engagement. Lots of sad face reacts. Couple people asking about the GoFundMe. Good. Walsh's voice was crisp, satisfied. Let everyone see how charitable I am, how devoted. When the inheritance becomes public knowledge, no one will question that I deserve a share. Are you sure she can't access it yet? Because the probate process takes weeks, sometimes months. By the time the money clears, I'll have documented months of supporting my poor disabled sister. Public sentiment will be on my side. The courts will see I'm the responsible one. Their footsteps faded down the corridor, heels and dress shoes clicking in sync. I lay there in the darkening room, staring at the ceiling tiles I'd already memorized. The video was out there now, spreading across social media like poison. People were watching me at my most vulnerable, believing Walsh's carefully constructed narrative. She wasn't just destroying me privately. She was doing it in front of an audience, rewriting history, in real time casting herself as the hero and me as the burden. My whole body trembled from pain, from hunger, from a fury so intense it felt like it might burn through my skin. But underneath the rage, something else was forming, something cold and hard and patient. As I lay there, the video already spreading across social media, I made a decision. I would remember this. Every angle, every lie, every calculated performance. And one day, the camera would show the truth. The next morning, I woke to Nurse Linda shaking my shoulder. "You're being discharged," she said flatly. Discharged. Every nerve in my body screamed. "It's only been 2 days. I can't walk." "Your sister signed AMA paperwork against medical advice discharge." Linda's face was carefully neutral. "She's taking responsibility for removing you from care." Before I could process that, Dr. Patterson entered, gray-haired, grim-faced. "Miss Foster, this is medically inadvisable in the extreme. You're at high risk for infection. Your bones haven't begun to heal, and you need monitoring." My recommendation is that this conversation is over. Walsh stepped inside wearing cream designer clothes and gold jewelry, looking like she'd just left a business lunch. She set an expensive leather tote on the counter with casual authority. "I'm taking my sister home for family care," Walsh announced. "We can't afford extended hospital stays. The bills are already astronomical." "Walsh, please, I can pay for—" My voice cracked. "You don't have access to your accounts, Elena." Her tone was perfectly reasonable. "I checked with the bank this morning. Your inheritance is tied up in probate. James Callahan hasn't transferred any funds yet, and he won't for weeks, possibly months. That's how estate law works. Until then, you're broke." The words hit like ice water. She was right. Charles's estate would need court approvals, creditor notifications, tax assessments. The money existed, but I couldn't touch it yet. And our joint account, which I emptied yesterday, $175,000. I had to use it to secure housing for you, pay the medical transport, hire your caregiver. Walsh pulled pre-signed papers from her tote. "Everything's legal." Dr. Patterson looked between us, clearly uncomfortable, but he knew he was beaten. Hospital administrators wouldn't fight this one, less uninsured patient. 20 minutes later, I was being wheeled toward a dingy medical transport van with rust spots and a cracked windshield. The driver helped transfer me to a gurney that smelled of disinfectant and old cigarette smoke. The apartment Walsh had secured was in Logan Square, miles from her Gold Coast condo. Working-class building with peeling paint and a broken elevator. The driver and Walsh, half carried, half dragged me up 2 flights of stairs, my cast banging against the railing with each step. Inside was a 400-square-foot studio with water-stained ceiling tiles and a window facing a brick wall. A hospital bed stood in the center, surrounded by bare minimum supplies. A woman in tired scrubs waited inside mid-40s with exhausted eyes. "This is Teresa, your home health aide," Walsh said, without bothering with last names. 8 hours a day, $15 an hour. I'll pay her weekly. She turned to Teresa. "Make sure she stays in bed." Teresa nodded, but something in her expression said she'd seen this before, families abandoning vulnerable people. Walsh left without looking back. Teresa was kind, helped me into bed, adjusted pillows, left water and crackers within reach. But after her 8-hour shift ended, she had to leave. 3 other clients, she explained apologetically. She'd be back tomorrow morning. Night 1 alone was a nightmare. I couldn't reach the bedside commode. The humiliation of lying in my own waste, unable to do anything about it, was crushing. I cried silently in the dark, listening to sirens wail past on the street below. Day 3, Teresa arrived late and empty-handed. "Mrs. Mason hasn't paid me," she said, voice heavy with regret. "I'm so sorry, Elena, but I can't work for free. I have Bill's kids in school." She pressed a piece of paper with her phone number into my hand. "If you get access to money, call me. I'll come back. But until then..." She left, the door closed. No phone, Walsh had taken mine, claiming she'd keep it safe. No food, the crackers were gone. No way to walk, no way to reach anyone, no way to do anything but lie there and wait to die. I had to try something. Using every ounce of strength in my upper body, I dragged myself out of the bed. My legs were useless dead weight that screamed with pain when I moved them. I pulled myself across the floor by my forearms, inch by agonizing inch, aiming for the door. If I could just get to the hallway, someone would see me. Someone would help. I reached the door, managed to turn the knob. The door swung open onto the interior stairwell. 3 concrete steps led down to the landing. I didn't see them in time. My momentum carried me forward, and I tumbled, body slamming against concrete cast, cracking against metal railing, head bouncing off the landing floor. The impact knocked the air from my lungs. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't think. When my vision cleared, I realized I was outside. The building's exterior door had been propped open with a brick, and I'd rolled through it onto the sidewalk. January in Chicago is brutal. The rain that started falling wasn't the gentle spring kind. It was freezing, needle-sharp, the kind that soaks through clothes in seconds. My hospital gown offered no protection. Within minutes, I was shivering violently, hypothermia setting in fast. I tried to call for help, but my voice was a raspy whisper lost in the sound of rain and traffic. People walked past. A man in a business suit stepped over me, phone to his ear. A woman with a stroller gave me a wide berth, pulling her child close, like my suffering might be contagious. I was invisible, just another broken thing on a Chicago street. The cold seeped into my bones. My shivering slowed, a bad sign. My thoughts grew fuzzy at the edges. The rain drummed against the pavement, washing blood from my reopened wounds into the gutter. As the rain soaked through my hospital gown and my broken body trembled on the concrete, I thought, this is how I die. Not from the accident, but from my sister's cruelty. I don't know how long I laid there. Minutes felt like hours. I was drifting in and out of consciousness when I heard a car door slam. The sound cut through the rain, sharp, urgent, close. Footsteps pounded against wet pavement, running. "Oh my God, Elena, Elena!" A man's voice, horrified. Through blurred vision, I saw a figure kneeling beside me, tall, dark overcoat, graying hair plastered by rain. James Callahan, Charles Ashford's attorney, the man who'd read me the will 4 days ago. He pressed fingers against my neck, checking for a pulse phone already at his ear. "I need an ambulance at 2847 North Kedzie Avenue. Woman, early 30s, hypothermic, severe injuries." He glanced at my soaked hospital gown, the cast. "She's been exposed to the elements, Jesus open fractures, barely conscious. Yes, this is an emergency." He shrugged out of his wool overcoat and draped it over me, tucking it around my shivering body. The fabric was warm and smelled like cedar and safety. He knelt on the wet concrete, heedless of his expensive pants getting soaked. "Elena, stay with me." His voice was firm but kind. "Help is coming. Can you hear me?" I managed a whisper. "James, how did you find me?" His face twisted between relief and rage. "I've been looking for 3 days. You weren't at your apartment address. The hospital wouldn't tell me where your sister took you, patient privacy laws. I had to get a court order for discharge records. The driver remembered this address." He brushed wet hair from my face with gentle fingers. I should have moved faster. The ambulance arrived within minutes. EMTs swarmed, warm blankets, IV lines, oxygen mask. They loaded me onto a gurney. "We're taking her to Northwestern Memorial," the lead paramedic announced. "No." Callahan climbed into the ambulance beside me. "Not Northwestern. She's not going back there." The paramedic frowned. "Sir, that's the nearest level 1 trauma." "I don't care. Her sister has connections there, and her sister is the reason she's in this condition." Callahan pulled out his phone. "I'm arranging private medical transport to Lake Forest. You stabilize her here, I'll have a private ambulance meet us. It's an estate property with full medical capabilities. I'll sign whatever liability waivers you need." The authority in his voice made things happen fast. Within the hour, I was being transferred to a sleek private vehicle with a registered nurse monitoring my vitals. I drifted during the 40-mile drive north. Fragments registered highway signs, gates opening onto a tree-lined private drive, a stone mansion that looked like an English estate, being carried through hallways that smelled of lemon polish instead of antiseptic. When I woke with clarity, I was in a bedroom that bore no resemblance to any hospital. Crown molding, cream ceiling, large windows overlooking gardens and forest. The bed had Egyptian cotton sheets, not scratchy hospital linens. Medical equipment surrounded me but integrated tastefully, almost invisible. James Callahan sat in a leather armchair beside the bed, his overcoat gone but his dress shirt still damp. "You're safe now," he said simply. Something inside me broke, not shattered but released. The story poured out in fragments. Walsh's cruelty, the POA abuse, the surgery she'd refused Trevor's video, the apartment Teresa leaving the fall, the rain people stepping over me. Callahan listened without interrupting his expression, growing progressively harder. When I ran out of words, he leaned forward, elbows on knees. I should have anticipated this. Charles warned me his will might create complications. He knew his own children were vultures, that's why he disinherited them. "But I didn't move fast enough to protect you." His jaw tightened. "That ends now." "The inheritance," I whispered. "Did I dream it?" "You didn't dream it." He pulled out a leather folder showing documents with official seals and Charles's signature. $62 million in liquid assets, plus controlling interest in Ashford Enterprises. It's real, Elena, and we're going to make damn sure Walsh never touches a penny. But how she's been stealing, she has my medical power of attorney, which we're revoking immediately. As for the rest, we follow Charles's plan exactly as he wrote it. Callahan pulled out another document, a letter in Charles's handwriting. Charles was brilliant. He knew sudden wealth destroys unprepared people. He knew opportunists would circle. So he built protections into the will. He handed me the letter. "Elena, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I hope Callahan found you before the vultures did damage. Listen to him. He's suggesting you disappear for 6 months. It feels like running, but it's strategy. Use that time to heal physically and mentally. Learn the business. Get strong. When you emerge, you'll be ready. Trust the process. Trust yourself." Charles. 6 months, I repeated. Disappear. The will stipulates a 6-month rehabilitation and training period before you assume control of Ashford Enterprises. During that time, your legal identity as Elena Foster is suspended. You become E. Ashford on all documents. You can't contact anyone from your previous life. No friends, no Walsh. So she thinks I vanished. Into the shelter system, probably. That's what happens to people on sidewalks in rain. His expression was grim. Meanwhile, you'll be here. Fully staffed medical facility, physical therapists, corporate trainers, security, everything you need to transform from victim to CEO. I looked around the elegant room, then at my battered body, then back at Callahan. She wanted me dependent, broken, and Charles gave you resources to become the opposite. Callahan stood. The question is, what do you want to do with them? The rain still drummed against windows, but I wasn't cold anymore. I wasn't helpless. And I wasn't the naive sister who'd woken in Northwestern ICU 4 days ago. "I want justice," I said, voice steady. "I want Walsh to understand what she's done, and I want her to pay." Callahan's expression shifted into something like approval. "Then let's begin." As Callahan explained the 6-month plan Charles had designed, I realized my benefactor had given me more than money. He'd given me time. Time to heal, time to prepare, and time to ensure my sister would pay for every cruelty. The morning after brought clarity, medical and otherwise. I woke to voices outside my door. Not the harsh, dismissive tones I'd grown accustomed to at Northwestern, but calm, professional discussion. Through the half-open door, I caught glimpses of Callahan speaking with a man I didn't recognize, late 50s. Silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, wearing what looked like expensive European tailoring. When they entered, Callahan's expression was serious but not grim. "Elena, this is Dr. Henrik Weber. He flew in from Zurich last night." Dr. Weber approached my bed with the focused intensity of someone who'd seen thousands of complex cases. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. "Miss Foster, I need to examine your legs." "Mister, Callahan has explained your situation." His English carried a slight Swiss-German precision. "What happened to you at the other hospital was criminal negligence." "May I?" I nodded, bracing myself for pain. His examination was thorough and surprisingly gentle, but his face grew increasingly grave. When he finally straightened, he pulled off his gloves with barely controlled anger. "This is medical abandonment of the worst kind. You have compartment syndrome developing in your right leg. Infection has started in the left. Without immediate intervention," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "you face permanent disability, possibly amputation within 2 weeks if the sepsis spreads." The room tilted. "Can you fix it?" "Yes." His certainty was absolute. "But we must act immediately. 6 to 7 hours of surgery minimum. I'll need to reconstruct both tibius, insert titanium rods, perform bone grafting where the initial fractures were misaligned. It's complex, but I've done this procedure hundreds of times." He looked at Callahan. "We should schedule for tomorrow morning. I'll need the surgical team briefed tonight." "Wait," I said, my voice small. I don't have insurance anymore. Walsh canceled it. And the money from Charles is tied up in probate, right? I can't afford." Callahan interrupted his tone, brooking no argument. "The Ashford estate is covering all medical expenses. Period. Money is not a factor in your care. Ever again." Something in the way he said it made me pause. "What do you mean, ever again?" Dr. Weber glanced at Callahan, then back at me. "I'll give you 2 privacy. I need to coordinate with the surgical staff." He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Callahan pulled a chair close to my bed and sat down, setting his leather briefcase on his lap. "I should have explained this sooner, but you needed to be stable first. Charles's will is extensive, and it contains very specific protections designed for exactly this kind of situation." He pulled out a thick document, but instead of handing it to me, he just held it. "You inherited $62 million in liquid assets, cash, stocks, bonds. But that's not all. You also received a 68% controlling stake in Ashford Enterprises. That makes you the majority shareholder and effectively the owner of a $2.4 billion corporation." I couldn't process it. The numbers were too big. But Walsh said the money was in probate, that it would take weeks. Walsh, Callahan said flatly, was lying, or operating on incomplete information. The liquid assets cleared probate the day after the will was read. I had them transferred to a protected trust account in your name on January 23rd, the morning of your accident. He leaned forward. "Elena, you've had access to that money since the day you woke up in the ICU. Walsh never knew that. She thought you were broke and helpless." The betrayal hit me again, fresh and sharp. My own sister had abandoned me thinking I had nothing. "But why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you help me sooner?" His expression tightened with something that looked like guilt. "I tried. I called Northwestern 6 times that first day. Each time Walsh told them she was your medical proxy and that you were not to receive visitors or calls. By law, they had to comply. It took me 48 hours to get a court order overriding her authority. Then another day to find you after she'd moved you out of the hospital." His voice dropped. "I'm sorry I didn't act faster. Charles warned me your inheritance might cause complications. I didn't imagine it would nearly kill you." I closed my eyes, fighting tears. "Why did Charles leave me all this? I barely knew him. We met maybe a dozen times. He saw something in you. Kindness, I think. Intelligence that hadn't been corrupted by ambition." Callahan opened the will to a specific page marked with a yellow tab. "But he also knew that giving you immediate control of that much wealth, especially in your current state, would make you a target. So he built in protections." "What kind of protections?" "A 6-month waiting period before you assume full control. During that time, your legal identity as Elena Foster is suspended. All documents, all accounts, everything is under the name E. Ashford. You disappear from public record. No one can find you, sue you, or manipulate you. 6 months of hiding. 6 months of healing and training. He pulled out another document, a training schedule. Charles built an empire from nothing. He didn't want to hand you a fortune and throw you to the wolves. For the next 6 months, you'll undergo physical rehabilitation to walk again, but you'll also receive intensive corporate training from Ashford's executive team, finance operations management strategy. By the time those 6 months end, you won't just own the company, you'll know how to run it. I stared at the schedule, overwhelmed. And then what? Then you walk into the boardroom as chairwoman of Ashford Enterprises. Full voting control, full authority. You become one of the most powerful business owners in America. He closed the folder. Charles called it the chrysalis protocol. You go in broken, you come out transformed. It sounded impossible, like a fairy tale. Why would he do this for me? Callahan reached into his jacket and pulled out a handwritten letter, expensive stationery elegant fountain pen script. He left this for you. I was instructed to give it to you before the surgery. I unfolded it with shaking hands. Pain became my teacher. Every session in the therapy room taught me what my body could endure and what my mind could plan. Maria Rodriguez, my physical therapist, was a former Army medic with iron gray hair pulled into a severe bun and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that made you sit up straighter, even in a wheelchair. She wheeled me into the rehab gym on a gray February morning and said, "We start with upper body today. Your legs aren't ready to bear weight yet, but we need core strength if you're ever going to walk again. You're going to hate me for the next 6 weeks." She was right. The first exercises were humiliating resistance bands that felt like iron chains, assisted stretches that left me gasping, trying to lift my own body weight while my arms shook and my vision swam. I'd always been active, always moved through life with easy confidence. Now I couldn't pull myself out of a wheelchair without trembling. "Pain means healing," Maria said on day 3 when I was close to tears and ready to quit. "You're rebuilding bone muscle nerve pathways. Your body is a construction site right now. Be patient with it." But patience had never been my strength, and now trapped between broken and whole, I was discovering something I'd never cultivated before: cold, calculating rage that sharpened thought instead of clouding it. By the 3rd week, when Callahan arrived with his leather portfolio stuffed with corporate documents, I'd graduated from bedridden to wheelchair mobile, which felt like progress until I realized how much dignity I'd lost in the process. He spread an organizational chart across the table in the sunroom, Ashford Enterprises at the top, a sprawling tree of subsidiaries branching beneath. "Luxury real estate in New York, Miami, Los Angeles," he explained, tapping each box with his pen. 3 fashion houses, all mid-tier luxury. Jewelry that's Radiance and Company, your flagship. 2 boutique hotel chains. Combined annual revenue, $2.4 billion. The numbers felt surreal, like someone else's life bleeding into mine. "I'm an archivist," I said flatly. "I catalog historical documents for university libraries. I don't know the first thing about running a corporation." Callahan slid a training schedule toward me. "You're not running it yet. You're learning. Charles left you an exceptional executive team. They've been managing day-to-day operations for decades. Your job isn't to micromanage. It's to understand strategy well enough to protect what he built." His finger traced down the chart to one subsidiary that made my breath catch. Radiance and Company, the luxury jewelry brand Walsh had obsessed over for years, pinning images of diamond necklaces and sapphire bracelets she could never afford on secret Pinterest boards I'd accidentally discovered during a holiday visit. An idea flickered in my mind, dangerous and delicious, but I kept my expression neutral and simply said, "Tell me more about Radiance." The 4th week brought the walker a humiliating metal cage that became my lifeline as I relearned what it meant to stand. The first time I gripped the handles and pulled myself upright, knees, shaking Dr. Weber and Maria, flanking me like sentries, I thought my legs would shatter all over again. But I stayed up. 10 seconds became 20. 20 became a full minute, and when Maria said, "That's enough for today," I gasped out, "One more lap," and made it halfway across the room before my body gave out and she had to catch me. That night, icing my legs and swallowing pain medication, I opened my laptop and started researching Walsh with the same methodical attention I'd once applied to archival documents. Her Instagram was a masterclass in calculated performance rooftop bars on Michigan Avenue, designer shopping bags arranged just so, carefully staged shots of her Gold Coast penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Every caption dripped with false humility, blessed living the dream, grateful. Trevor's account was worse. His hospital support video had racked up over 200,000 views, comments overflowing with sympathy and praise for Walsh's sisterly devotion. The GoFundMe link he'd embedded had raised $18,000 every cent, routed to an account Walsh controlled. I asked Callahan to investigate their finances, and when he returned with data on his tablet, the picture that emerged was breathtaking in its fragility. "They're leveraged to the hilt," he said. "Trevor lost his marketing job 6 months ago and hasn't told Walsh yet. They're living on credit cards and her salary. Combined debt, $7 million, most of it high-interest personal loans and cash advances. They're one bad month away from total collapse. $7 million. The same people who'd left me to die on a rain-soaked sidewalk were hemorrhaging money to maintain an illusion of success. And suddenly, the plan that had been forming in fragments snapped into perfect clarity. By week 6, when I could stand for 5 minutes without my legs buckling, and Callahan had started inviting me to sit in on virtual board meetings, camera off, microphone muted. My identity hidden behind the designation E. Ashford majority shareholder, I began asking very specific questions. What happens if a brand ambassador violates their morality clause? I asked during one late-night strategy session. Callahan pulled up a sample Radiance & Company contract and explained liquidated damages, standard in high-value endorsement deals. If the ambassador does something that damages the brand's reputation, they pay a penalty. Top-tier contracts carry a $15 million clause. $15 million, exactly twice what Walsh and Trevor owed. I could almost see the trap assembling itself piece by elegant piece, Walsh's desperate hunger for luxury, her public persona as the devoted sister, the morality clause she'd never be able to honor once I revealed what she'd really done, the debt that would crush her when she couldn't pay. "I'm going to offer her everything she's ever wanted," I told Callahan. "A Radiance & Company brand ambassadorship, 6-figure contract designer jewelry magazine spreads. She'll sign without reading the fine print because she always does. And when I expose what she did to me, when the world sees the real Walsh, that morality clause will detonate and bury her under debt. She can't escape." By week 8, I could walk across a room without grimacing, and my mind had grown as sharp as my body was strong. I understood now what Charles had meant about the chrysalis. This wasn't just physical healing, it was transformation into something Walsh couldn't destroy, because she'd never see it coming. She thought I was buried under medical debt and legal red tape, too broken to fight back. She had no idea I'd spent 2 months studying her weaknesses, learning corporate strategy, building a snare from her own greed and vanity. Standing at my window one cold March evening, watching the sun set blood red over the frozen lake, I spoke quietly to my reflection. "You wanted to destroy me, Walsh. Instead, you gave me a reason to become someone you can't destroy, and now I'm going to let you destroy yourself." The past has a way of refusing to stay buried. I learned this while searching through my own history hidden in my sister's lies. By late March, I'd graduated from walker to cane, a sleek black walking stick that made me feel less like an invalid and more like someone reclaiming her life. The pain was manageable, now reduced to a dull ache that flared only when I pushed too hard. Maria had cleared me for independent mobility, which meant I could move through the Lake Forest estate without constant supervision. Callahan arrived on a Thursday afternoon carrying a banker's box that he set on the dining room table with a heavy thud. "Financial records we subpoenaed from Walsh's accounts," he explained. "Credit card statements, loan documents, bank transfers, everything we need to build a case for financial abuse." He paused. "Are you sure you want to go through these yourself?" "I need to see it," I said. "All of it." I sorted methodically the way I'd been trained to handle archival materials, chronologically by category, with careful attention to detail. Credit card statements showing luxury purchases Walsh couldn't afford, loan documents with predatory interest rates, bank transfers from our joint account to hers, dated the day after the will reading. Each piece of paper was another thread in the web of betrayal. Then, wedged between two manila folders near the bottom, I found something that didn't belong, an old envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with brittle tape. The handwriting on the front made my breath catch my father's distinctive scrawl, neat and precise, despite the tremor in his final years. To Walsh Foster, to be opened on your 30th birthday. Walsh had turned 30 over 8 years ago. This letter had never been opened. My hands trembled. This was addressed to Walsh, not me. Reading it would be an invasion of privacy, except Walsh had forfeited any claim to privacy when she'd forfeited her humanity. And if my father had written something that might explain the woman my sister had become, I needed to know. I carefully peeled back the tape and opened the envelope. Inside were 2 items, a handwritten letter on my father's stationery and a photocopied police report, edges worn and faded. The police report was dated 12 years ago, investigation into the death of Margaret Foster. I'd been 10 when my mother died. Walsh had been 15. We'd been told it was an accident. She'd fallen down the stairs, hit her head, died before the ambulance arrived. A terrible random tragedy. But as I read the report, a different story emerged. The official conclusion was accidental death case closed within 48 hours. But attached was a witness statement that had never been followed up on, filed by our neighbor, Mrs. Patricia. I heard loud arguing between Margaret Foster and her older daughter, approximately 15 minutes before I heard screaming and a loud crash. The daughter was yelling, "It's not fair. You always choose her." Then silence, then screaming. I called 911 immediately. The words blurred. I forced myself to reach for my father's letter with hands that shook so badly I nearly dropped it. My dearest Walsh, by the time you read this, you'll be 30 years old, and I pray you've found some measure of peace. I'm writing this on your 22nd birthday, knowing I may not live to see your 30th, and knowing there are things that must be said, even if they're said too late. I never told you that I knew about the argument with your mother that day. Mrs. Patricia told me after the funeral, torn apart by guilt, wondering if she should tell the police what she'd heard. I asked her not to. I begged her not to. Because I knew Walsh. I knew you hadn't meant for it to happen. I knew you'd pushed her in anger, not realizing she was standing at the top of the stairs. I knew you'd watched her fall and that the sound would haunt you forever. I chose not to pursue it because losing both your mother and you would have destroyed what was left of our family. You were 15, a child, a scared, guilt-ridden child who'd made a terrible mistake in a moment of anger. But Walsh, your mother's disappointment in you was never about Elena. It was about the choices you were making. The lying, the stealing, the cutting school. She was trying to help you and you pushed her away, literally. Elena was 10 years old. She adored you. She had nothing to do with any of it. But I've watched you these past 7 years, and I've seen the way you look at her. The way you blame her for the guilt you can't face. The way you punish her for your own sins. It has to stop, Walsh. By the time you read this, I'll be gone. The doctors have given me perhaps 2 years. I'm giving this to my lawyer with instructions to deliver it on your 30th birthday because I desperately hope that by then you'll have found the strength to forgive yourself, to stop destroying the one person who loved you unconditionally despite everything. Please, Walsh, find help. Let go of the anger. Stop making Elena pay for a crime she didn't commit. I love you. I've always loved you, but I can't protect you from yourself anymore. Dad. The letter slipped from my hands and drifted to the floor. My mother hadn't died in an accident. She died because Walsh had pushed her in a jealous rage, and my father had known, and he'd chosen to bury the truth to save his surviving daughter from prosecution. And Walsh had spent 12 years punishing me for her own guilt. Memories crashed over me. Walsh hugging me at the funeral, whispering, "It's just us now, Elena. I'll take care of you." The way her eyes had looked, not sad, but empty. Hollowed out. I'd thought it was shock. Now I understood it was the moment she'd chosen to redirect her guilt, to make it my fault somehow, to convince herself that if I hadn't existed, Mom wouldn't have been disappointed in her, wouldn't have been standing at the top of those stairs. Every cruel comment, every comparison, every time Walsh had undermined my confidence, she hadn't been jealous of me. She'd been trying to erase me to punish the symbol of her own failure. The sobs came without warning, wrenching and painful, not just for my mother's death, but for the sister I'd lost that same day. The woman who'd left me to die on a rain-soaked sidewalk wasn't really my sister anymore. She was a ghost, haunting the shell of someone I'd once loved. I don't know how long I sat there crying before Callahan returned. He took one look at me at the letter on the floor at the police report clutched in my hand, and his expression shifted from concern to alarm. "Elena, what did you find?" I couldn't speak. I just handed him the documents and watched his face change as he read. When he finished, he set them down carefully and said, "This changes everything. We can reopen the investigation. Statute of limitations doesn't apply to—" No. He blinked. "Elena, she was 15 years old." I said, my voice raw. "Scared and stupid and angry, and she's been in prison ever since a prison she built for herself, out of guilt and self-hatred. I won't add to that." I met his eyes. "But I will make sure she pays for what she did to me. The adult woman who looked at her helpless, injured sister and chose cruelty, who tried to destroy me to make herself feel better about the destruction she caused 12 years ago. That woman deserves everything that's coming." Callahan studied me for a long moment. "You're showing her more mercy than she showed you." "I know." I picked up the letter, folded it carefully, and locked it in the safe in my room. Walsh's secret stays buried, but her crimes against me, those will be shouted from the rooftops. Some transformations happen in the therapy room. Others happen in front of a mirror where you decide who you're going to become. By early April, I was walking short distances without the cane. The titanium rods in my legs had integrated fully, the bone grafts had healed, and the nerve pathways that Dr. Weber had painstakingly reconstructed were firing correctly again. During my monthly video consultation with him, he'd returned to Zurich but monitored my progress remotely. He shook his head in what looked like professional amazement. "This is miraculous progress, Miss Ashford. You've exceeded every projection we made. Most patients at your stage would still be using assistive devices for another 3 months minimum." "I have motivation," I said simply. He smiled, a rare softening of his usually clinical expression. Motivation is powerful medicine. What I didn't tell him was that my motivation wasn't just about walking again. It was about walking into a room and making Walsh realize too late exactly who she'd tried to destroy. Callahan understood. A week after that consultation, he arrived with a woman named Simone Duchamp, a Parisian image consultant who'd worked with executives across 3 continents. She was 60-something, elegant in head-to-toe black with silver hair cut in a geometric bob, and eyes that assessed me like I was a sculpture that needed refinement. "We have 4 weeks, Callahan told her. "She needs to look like she was born to run a Fortune 500 company." Simone circled me slowly, taking in my ill-fitting casual clothes, my long unstyled hair, my bare face. 4 weeks, she murmured in accented English. "It will be tight, but possible." She met my eyes. "Are you prepared to let go of who you were?" "I already let go," I said. "I'm just deciding who I'm becoming." She smiled. "Then we begin." The transformation started with my hair. A stylist from a high-end Chicago salon came to the estate and spent 3 hours cutting and shaping what had been waist-length. Unstyled brown hair into a sharp-angled bob that skimmed my jawline. Severe, modern, powerful. When she turned me toward the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back. The cut made my cheekbones look sharper, my eyes larger, my whole face more defined. "Hair is communication," Simone explained. "You are telling the world I am not someone you can dismiss." Next came wardrobe. Simone brought in a personal tailor who took my measurements and returned a week later with suits in Italian wool charcoal navy, deep burgundy cut to fit my frame precisely. Silk blouses in cream and dove gray, a cashmere coat in camel, everything understated, nothing flashy. "Real wealth whispers," Simone said. "Your sister shouts. You will whisper and everyone will lean in to hear." But the hardest part of the physical transformation was the shoes. I'd been walking in flats and sneakers for months. Now Simone presented me with a progression 2-inch heels to start, then 3-inch building up to 4-inch Louboutins in classic black with the signature red sole. "You must walk into that boardroom like you own it," she said, "and you cannot do that in athletic shoes." The first day in 2-inch heels, I made it across the room before my calves seized and I had to sit down. Maria integrated heel training into our physical therapy sessions, balance exercises, calf strengthening, practicing walking with proper posture so the weight distributed correctly through my reconstructed legs. By mid-April, I could manage 3 inches for an hour. By late April, I walked the entire estate grounds in 4-inch Louboutins without pain. The physical transformation ran parallel to the intellectual one. I'd completed the executive training Callahan had arranged: financial analysis, strategic planning, public speaking, corporate governance. But more importantly, I'd started participating actively in virtual board meetings. Camera on now, asking questions, offering observations. The CFO, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia, had started addressing comments directly to me. "You have a natural aptitude for this, Miss Ashford," she'd said during our last quarterly review. Charles chose well. I'd smiled and thanked her, but what I was really learning wasn't just business strategy. I was learning how to wield power, how to ask a question that exposed a weakness, how to remain silent at exactly the right moment to make someone uncomfortable, how to speak with the kind of quiet authority that made people listen. And while I was learning to run an empire, I was also learning to dismantle my enemies. Callahan brought me updated financials on Walsh and Trevor every week. The picture grew increasingly desperate. They owed $7 million spread across 17 different creditors, personal loans, credit cards, private lending companies that charged interest rates that should have been illegal. They were living in a Gold Coast penthouse they couldn't afford at $12,000 a month. Trevor was leasing a Mercedes. He couldn't afford it $220 a month. Walsh's credit cards were maxed at their limits. Payments were overdue. Collection agencies were calling. "They're hemorrhaging money," Callahan said during our strategy session in early May. "Multiple creditors are threatening legal action. It's only a matter of time before something collapses." I studied the spreadsheet he'd prepared tracking every dollar Walsh and Trevor owed and to whom. An idea crystallized. Elegant, brutal, perfect. "Buy the debt," I said. "All of it." Callahan looked up sharply. "That's aggressive." "They wanted me powerless," I said calmly. "I'm going to show them what powerless actually feels like. Buy every loan, every credit card balance, every dollar they owe. Through Phoenix acquisition so they don't know it's me." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Most of these creditors would be happy to sell at a discount. They're worried about default. I could probably acquire the full $7 million in debt for around $5.2 million. Do it." It took 3 weeks to execute. Phoenix Acquisitions, the shell company Ashford Enterprises had created for sensitive transactions, quietly approached each of Walsh and Trevor's creditors with an offer: "Sell us the debt at IEE, 75 cents on the dollar, and your guaranteed payment within 30 days. No risk of default, no costly collection process. Most accepted immediately." By the 3rd week of May, Phoenix Acquisitions owned every dollar Walsh and Trevor owed. $7 million in debt purchased for $5.2 million, and they had no idea their new creditor was me. Callahan showed me the final documentation. "It's done. You now control their financial destruction." I locked the papers in my safe next to my father's letter to Walsh. 2 secrets, 2 weapons, both waiting for exactly the right moment. On the last Saturday in May, I walked the entire perimeter of the Lake Forest estate in 4-inch heels without stopping, without pain. When I returned to my room, I stood in front of the full-length mirror and studied the woman reflected there. She was a stranger. Sharp bob framing an angular face, tailored burgundy suit that spoke of boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions, Louboutins that added height and authority, posture, perfect expression, controlled eyes, cold and calculating. Not the soft, gentle archivist who'd spent years cataloging other people's histories. Not the broken, abandoned woman left to die on a rain-soaked sidewalk. This woman looked like she could run an empire. More importantly, she looked like someone my sister wouldn't recognize until it was far too late. "Ready?" I said to my reflection. And I was. The best traps are baited with the victim's own desires. Walsh's desire was recognition. I would give her a contract that looked like a victory but read like a death sentence. I was working in what had been the estate's library but had quietly transformed into my command center mahogany desk. Multiple monitors displaying real-time data from Ashford's subsidiaries. Walls lined with corporate documents instead of books. Callahan knocked and entered carrying his ever-present leather portfolio. The brand manager at Radiance & Company is asking about the new ambassador campaign, he said. The current contract expires in 3 weeks. They need someone photogenic, socially connected with strong engagement metrics. I looked up from the financial statements I'd been reviewing. I want to offer the position to Walsh Foster. Callahan stopped mid-step. Your sister, the woman who tried to cripple you? Exactly her, but with conditions. I spent the next week drafting the contract, personally working closely with Ashford's legal team. The offer looked generous on the surface, extraordinarily so. $500,000 annual fee plus performance bonuses. The Stars of Eternity campaign, Radiance's flagship jewelry line, launching in fall. Walsh would appear in print ads, billboards, social media campaigns. Her face would be synonymous with luxury, elegance, aspiration. Everything she'd ever wanted. But buried in Section 8, written in the dense legal language that most people skimmed over, was the morality clause. I made sure it was ironclad. The ambassador agrees to maintain an unblemished public image consistent with the brand's values of elegance, integrity, and ethical conduct. The ambassador shall refrain from any behavior that could reasonably be construed as harassment, fraud, elder abuse, medical negligence, or any other conduct that would bring disrepute to the brand or its affiliated companies. In the event of breach of this morality clause, as determined solely by the brand at its reasonable discretion, this agreement shall terminate immediately, and the ambassador shall pay liquidated damages in the amount of $15 million, $15 million within 30 days of written notice. This amount represents a reasonable pre-estimate of damages the brand would suffer from reputational harm, and is not a penalty. I'd worked with 3 different attorneys to ensure the language was broad enough to encompass Walsh's hospital abuse, the abandoned patient, the medical proxy violation. The public video Trevor had posted that portrayed Walsh as a saint while I suffered, but specific enough to hold up in court when she inevitably challenged it. The lead counsel, a sharp-eyed woman named Margaret Ross, reviewed the final draft and looked up at me with concern. Miss Ashford, this morality clause is unusually harsh. Most brand ambassador contracts carry penalties in the 1 to 3 million range. 15 million is extraordinarily punitive. My brand represents elegance and integrity, I said calmly. If someone violates that publicly, the damage to Radiance's reputation would be catastrophic. I need insurance. She nodded slowly, still looking uncertain. And you're certain you want to offer this to Walsh Foster specifically? Absolutely certain. The contract was sent through Radiance's official channels, legal letterhead, professional courier, the whole corporate theater that made it look legitimate and prestigious. No indication that the majority shareholder had personally designed it as a trap. I didn't see Walsh's reaction directly. I wouldn't compromise the careful distance I'd maintained. But I knew my sister. I could predict her response as clearly as if I'd been standing in her Gold Coast penthouse watching her open the envelope. She would have screamed, called Trevor, read the fee amount out loud, $500,000, and felt that intoxicating rush of validation she'd been chasing her entire life. Finally, a luxury brand had recognized her value. Finally, she was being seen as she'd always believed she deserved to be seen. She would have immediately started planning the announcement, which designer she'd wear, how she'd stage the Instagram, reveal what caption would maximize engagement. I knew this because years ago, when we'd still shared holiday dinners, I'd accidentally seen draft emails on her iPad, desperate pitches to Radiance and other luxury brands begging for collaborations, name-dropping connections she didn't have. She'd been obsessed with this particular company for half a decade. Now they were offering her everything she'd ever wanted. She wouldn't read the fine print carefully. She never did. 3 days after the contract was sent, Callahan returned to my office with confirmation. Walsh Foster signed this morning. Her attorney advised her to review Section 8 more carefully. She overruled him and signed anyway. He set the executed contract on my desk. She even posted about it on Instagram, exciting news coming soon with a diamond emoji. I closed my eyes, feeling something that might have been guilt flicker in my chest for just a moment. Then I remembered lying on that rain-soaked sidewalk, legs shattered, hypothermic, abandoned by the person who was supposed to protect me. I remembered the cold satisfaction in Walsh's eyes when she'd told me at the hospital that she would decide my medical care. I remembered Trevor's camera in my face turning my suffering into content. The guilt evaporated. "When will you trigger the morality clause?" Callahan asked quietly. "After the gala," I said. "Let her have one moment thinking she's won. Let her walk into that announcement event feeling like she's finally achieved everything she deserves." I opened my eyes and met his gaze. "Then I'll show her the video of what she really is. And that contract she just signed will detonate everything." Callahan pulled up another file on his tablet. "There's something else you should know. Trevor sold the leased Mercedes yesterday, paid the buyout penalty, took a significant loss. Bank records show he used the money to purchase a $58,000 gown from a boutique on Oak Street." "For Walsh," I said. It wasn't a question. "For Walsh, for the Radiance announcement gala next month." I almost laughed. They were drowning in $7 million of debt that I now owned. Their credit cards were maxed. Collection agencies were calling. And they were spending their last liquid resources on a designer dress for the event where I would destroy them. "They're buying designer life preservers while the ship sinks," I murmured. "They don't know it's sinking," Callahan pointed out. "They think they're about to be rescued." I picked up the signed contract, Walsh's flowing signature at the bottom next to the date. She'd signed her own financial death warrant in exchange for a photo shoot and a press release. I almost pitied her. Almost. Every great performance needs a stage. Mine would be the Palmer House Hilton, and the audience would be Chicago's elite. All I needed was for my sister to walk through those doors. I stood in the estate's command center reviewing the final plans spread across my desk. Seating charts, security protocols, media credentials, catering manifests. Callahan and Patricia, the CFO, flanked me as we went through every detail. "The annual Ashford Enterprises Charity Gala," Patricia said, "July 26th. Exactly 6 months from the date you inherited. The Palmer House Grand Ballroom," Callahan added. 400 guests, the wealthiest and most influential people in Chicago. CEOs, philanthropists, politicians, old money. The city's power structure in one room. I nodded. Everything had been building toward this moment for 6 months. Every physical therapy session, every board meeting, every strategic move. The chrysalis protocol ended on July 26th. On that date, Elena Foster would legally cease to exist, and Elena Ashford would emerge fully publicly with complete control of a $2.4 billion empire. And Walsh would be there to witness it. Public purpose. I asked, though I'd written the plan myself. "Fundraising for the Ashford Foundation," Patricia said. "Education grants medical research arts programs, completely legitimate." "And the private purpose," Callahan met my eyes. "Your debut as chairwoman and Walsh's destruction." "Send the invitations," I said. The invitations went out the following week. Thick cream cardstock with gold embossing the kind of stationery that announced importance before you even opened the envelope. Ashford Enterprises cordially invites you to the annual Charity Gala Saturday, July 26, 2025, Palmer House Hilton. Grand Ballroom 7 o'clock, p.m. reception os 8 o'clock, p.m. dinner. Black tie required. Join us for an evening of philanthropy and celebration. Meet the new chairwoman. That last line was the hook. The business community had been buzzing for months about the mysterious E. Ashford who'd taken control of Charles's empire. No one had confirmed an identity. No one had seen photos. The gala would be the reveal. Walsh and Trevor's invitation was hand-delivered to their Gold Coast penthouse. I wasn't there to see their reaction wouldn't compromise the careful separation I'd maintained, but I knew my sister well enough to predict exactly how it would unfold. Walsh would have torn open the envelope and felt her heart spike when she saw the name Ashford Enterprises, the parent company of Radiance and Cored, the brand she'd just signed with. This wasn't just networking. This was access to the very top of the corporate hierarchy she'd been climbing her entire life. She would have called Trevor immediately. This is it. This is how we save everything. The executives from Radiance will be there, probably the chairwoman herself. If I can make the right connections, get some FaceTime with decision makers, maybe secure bigger contracts, the desperation would be palpable beneath the excitement. They were drowning in $7 million of debt, their lifestyle hemorrhaging their last resources. This gala looked like salvation. Trevor would ask the practical question, can we afford black tie attire? And Walsh would insist, we have to. This is the biggest opportunity we've had. If we play this right, we can meet investors, people who can help restructure our debt. What Walsh didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that every piece had already been positioned against her. Phoenix Acquisitions, the company that owned every dollar of their debt, was me. The new chairwoman they hoped to impress was me. The evidence of Walsh's hospital abuse, Trevor's video medical records witness statements, was compiled, verified, and ready to present. Agent Cooper of the FBI's Financial Crimes Division had been quietly building a fraud case. The stolen joint account funds, the GoFundMe scam, the medical proxy abuse. They thought they were attending a gala. They were walking into a courtroom. Everything is in position, Callahan said during our security briefing with David Marshall, head of Ashford's security operations. Marshall was ex-Secret Service, calm and competent, with the kind of presence that made you feel protected. He spread the ballroom layout across the table. Security will be tight but subtle. Plain clothes at every entrance. Video surveillance on all exits. Agent Cooper and his team will be in a private room adjacent to the ballroom. Once you give the signal, they move in 60 seconds. I studied the layout, imagining how it would unfold. The dinner, the speeches. The moment I would step onto that stage and Walsh would see me for the first time since she'd left me to die. What will you wear? Patricia asked. Image would matter that night more than any other. I pulled up a photo on my tablet, a midnight blue silk gown, elegant and architectural, with a high neckline and dramatic open back. Understated but commanding. And I'll wear the constellation. Patricia's eyes widened. The $8 million piece, Radiance's flagship necklace, I confirmed. The constellation was a platinum collar studded with 247 diamonds, arranged like the night sky, with a central 15-carat blue diamond that had once belonged to European royalty. It was the most valuable piece in Radiance's collection, usually kept in a vault. Walsh signed a contract to represent elegance and integrity. I want her to see exactly what that looks like. Callahan smiled grimly. Poetic. Justice usually is. The final preparations took 3 weeks. The speech was written and rewritten until every word carried maximum impact. The video evidence was edited into a 6-minute presentation that laid out Walsh's cruelty with clinical precision. Security protocols were rehearsed. Media credentials carefully controlled, only select outlets allowed inside, positioned exactly where I needed them. The week before the gala, David Marshall came to my office. Miss Ashford, he said, voice, carrying the weight of someone who understood consequences. Once we start this, there's no turning back. The moment you step onto that stage and reveal who you are, your life changes permanently, and Walsh's life ends. Are you certain? I thought about the question. Thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, gentle, trusting, willing to forgive almost anything. Thought about the woman I'd become, strategic, powerful, capable of dismantling someone's existence with legal precision. Then I thought about lying on that rain-soaked sidewalk, legs shattered, hypothermic, abandoned. I've been walking toward this moment for 6 months, I said quietly. I'm not stopping now. He nodded once, sharp and final. Then we're ready. I looked at the calendar on my desk. July 26th was circled in red ink. 6 weeks away. The invitations had been delivered. The stage was set. Walsh would walk into that ballroom thinking she was networking, building connections, saving her failing lifestyle. She had no idea she was attending her own trial, and I would be both prosecutor and judge. The night before battle generals survey the field, I chose Hermes on Oak Street, and Walsh, as predicted, was already there. I arrived mid-morning wearing minimal disguise, my hair styled differently than usual, pulled back severely instead of in the angled bob-oversized sunglasses despite the overcast sky. A cashmere coat in charcoal gray that cost more than most people's monthly rent, but looked understated enough to blend with Chicago's moneyed crowd. I wasn't there to shop. I was there to confirm that Walsh would crumble under pressure exactly the way I'd planned. The moment I stepped through the door, I heard her voice sharp, entitled "Cutting Through the Store's Hushed Elegance Like Nails on Glass." "Are you incompetent?" I specifically said the Kelly in a taupey gray, not gold. Walsh stood at the main counter, one manicured hand planted on the glass display case, the other gesturing aggressively at a young sales associate who looked close to tears. The associate, her name tag read, Sophie, was maybe 25, dark hair pulled into a neat ponytail, hands trembling slightly as she held a beautiful, honey-colored bag. "I sincerely apologize, ma'am," Sophie said, voice carefully controlled despite the tremor. "Let me check the back inventory again. Do you have any idea who I am?" Walsh's voice rose half an octave. "I'm the new brand ambassador for Radiance & Co. I could have you fired with one phone call." I positioned myself behind a display of silk scarves where I could observe without being noticed. My blood pressure spiked, but I kept my expression neutral. This was exactly why I'd come to see Walsh's true nature on display, one more time before the world saw it tomorrow. Sophie returned from the back room, her professional composure barely holding. "I'm so sorry, ma'am, but we don't currently have the toupee in stock. I can place a special order. I need it for tomorrow. There's an important gala." Special orders typically take 6 to 8 weeks. Walsh snatched her phone from her purse. "Then I'll post about this incompetence. My followers deserve to know how Hermes treats VIP clients." I'd seen enough. I stepped forward, my movement calculated to draw attention. "Is there a problem?" Walsh turned, her eyes raking over me, taking in the expensive coat, the Louboutins, the quiet confidence of someone who belonged in spaces like this. She saw a rival, not a sister. The transformation Simone had orchestrated was complete. Walsh had no idea she was looking at the woman she'd left to die 6 months ago. Her expression shifted to competitive assessment. "Nothing I can't handle, just educating staff about proper service standards." I turned to Sophie, my voice deliberately kind. "You're doing an excellent job. Some people mistake cruelty for class." Walsh's face flushed red. "Excuse me. I believe I was clear." I returned my attention to the scarf display, dismissing her. For a moment, I thought Walsh might actually escalate. Her jaw tightened. Her hands clenched. But then she pivoted sharply back to the counter and grabbed a black Birkin that had been sitting on display. "Fine, I'll take this. Right now." Sophie's eyes widened. "Ma'am, that particular piece is $42,000. "I'm aware. Ring it up." Sophie glanced at me apologetically, then moved to the register. She took Walsh's credit card, a black American Express that Walsh slapped down with theatrical confidence, and swiped it through the reader. Declined. Sophie's professional mask slipped for just a second. "I'm sorry, ma'am, there seems to be an issue. Would you like me to try again?" "It's a machine error. Try again." Second swipe. Declined. Walsh's confidence wavered. She pulled out a backup card, Visa signature. "Use this one." Declined. The color drained from Walsh's face. She fumbled in her wallet, pulling out Trevor's card. "This one. Try this one." Declined. I'd arranged it that morning. Phoenix Acquisitions had triggered immediate debt collection on all accounts associated with Walsh and Trevor Foster. Every credit card, every line of credit, every account frozen. The 30-day grace period they'd been counting on had just evaporated through a legal maneuver my attorneys assured me was completely legitimate when a debtor showed signs of flight risk. And Walsh's Instagram posts about the Radiance contract, combined with her spending patterns, qualified. Walsh tried 3 more cards, her voice rising with each declined transaction. "This is impossible. There's money in these accounts." The store manager approached a silver-haired woman whose expression remained professionally neutral despite the scene unfolding. "Perhaps you should contact your bank, ma'am." I don't need to contact anyone. Walsh's voice carried across the entire store now. Other customers, women in tailored suits and quiet jewelry, turned to stare. Try them again. Sophie tried 2 more cards with shaking hands. Declined. Declined. Walsh grabbed her purse face, burning with humiliation, and backed away from the counter. This store is trash anyway. I'll shop in New York. She turned and fled toward the door, her heels clicking rapidly against the marble floor. Through the window, I watched her nearly collide with Trevor, who'd been waiting on the sidewalk. He took one look at her face, and his expression shifted from confusion to alarm. Their voices carried through the glass. What happened? The cards aren't working. All of them. Someone froze the accounts. Phoenix, they said we had 30 days. Call them, now. They wouldn't reach anyone. I'd given explicit instructions, no contact with Walsh or Trevor Foster until after the gala. Let them panic. Let them spiral. Let them show up tomorrow desperate and off balance. I turned away from the window to find Sophie watching me, her eyes still glistening with unshed tears, but her expression cautiously grateful. Thank you for what you said. You didn't have to do that. What's your name? I asked. Sophie Martinez. I pulled a business card from my purse, thick cream stock gold embossing my full name and title. Call me next week. I have a position opening. Sophie took the card, then froze as she read it. Her eyes went wide. Elena Foster Ashford. You're the chairwoman of Ashford Enterprises. Yes. I let that sink in for a moment, then added quietly, and she was my sister. Remember what you saw today. Tomorrow the world will see it too. Sophie's hand closed around the card. I'll remember. I walked out of Hermes and back to the Blacktown car David Marshall had assigned to me, complete with a driver who knew not to ask questions. As we pulled away from the curb, I didn't feel satisfaction exactly, just a cold certainty settling into my bones. Tomorrow night, the world would see what I'd seen today. Walsh Foster, stripped of her designer armor, revealed as nothing more than cruelty and debt, wearing expensive clothes. And unlike this small humiliation in a boutique, tomorrow's exposure would be permanent. The stage was set. The trap was sprung. In 24 hours, Walsh would walk into that ballroom thinking she was networking her way to salvation. She had no idea she was walking into her own execution. Palmer House Hilton had witnessed Chicago history for 150 years. Tonight it would witness justice. I stood in a private dressing room off the Grand Ballroom's east wing, watching the final preparations in a full-length mirror. The makeup artist stepped back, nodding approval at her work's subtle contouring that made my cheekbones sharp enough to cut glass eyes lined in a way that made them look calculating and unreadable. The midnight blue silk gown fit like it had been painted onto my body, the open back revealing the titanium scars Dr. Weber had left behind now, badges of survival rather than marks of shame. And at my throat, the constellation, 247 diamonds catching the light with every breath, the 15-carat blue centerpiece resting perfectly against my collarbone. $8 million of crystallized power. David Marshall stood by the door, one hand on his earpiece monitoring security channels. Miss Ashford, guests are arriving. I turned to the bank of monitors mounted on the dressing room wall. 6 screens showed different angles of the red carpet entrance photographers, jostling for position videographers from local news stations. A steady stream of limousines and town cars depositing Chicago's elite in clouds of expensive perfume and designer fabric. Then on screen 3, I saw the Uber. A basic black sedan, noticeably cheaper than the vehicles around it, pulling up to the red carpet drop-off. The driver looked confused about whether he was allowed to stop there. A valet approached, clearly uncertain whether to open the door. Walsh stepped out first. The $58,000 dress looked stunning champagne silk with intricate beading, a deep V neckline, a dramatic train that caught the light. She'd styled her hair in an elaborate updo diamonds at her ears that were probably borrowed or rented. From a distance, she looked exactly like she belonged. But I could see what the cameras couldn't capture: the tightness around her eyes, the way her smile didn't quite reach them, the slight tremor in her hands as she smoothed the dress. She looked like a woman drowning who'd dressed up for the occasion. Trevor emerged behind her in a rented tuxedo. I could tell by the way it fit, slightly too loose in the shoulders, slightly too tight at the waist. He tugged at the collar as photographers called out Walsh's name. "Ms. Foster over here. Walsh, you look gorgeous. Spin for us." Walsh smiled that practiced Instagram perfect smile and posed. She was performing. She'd been performing her entire life, and tonight was just another show. A reporter from Chicago Social stepped forward with a microphone. "You look stunning tonight. Are you excited for the evening?" "Absolutely." Walsh said, her voice bright and hollow. "Radiance and Company has been such a blessing. Tonight is about celebrating success and making connections with Chicago's finest." Translation: "I need to meet investors. I'm desperate for money. Please let someone in this ballroom save me." They walked through the entrance, Walsh's heels clicking against marble Trevor, trailing half a step behind, looking like he wanted to disappear. I watched them enter the grand ballroom, watched Walsh's expression shift from confident to overwhelmed. The ballroom was breathtaking, I'd made sure of it. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from ceiling frescoes that had been restored to their 1920s glory. Gold leaf details caught the light from hundreds of candles. 400 guests in couture and custom tailoring filled the space with a low hum of power and money. Tables were draped in ivory linens, each centerpiece a sculpture of white orchids and roses. This was old Chicago wealth mixed with new corporate power, and the sheer scale of it seemed to hit Walsh like a physical force. Her confidence wavered. This was bigger than she'd imagined. More important, higher stakes. A hostess approached a young woman in a black dress with an iPad professionally trained to manage guest flow. "Mr. and Mrs. Mason, please follow me." Walsh straightened her performance mask, sliding back into place. "Of course, I assume we're at the Radiance table or perhaps with the executive." The hostess walked past the main tables at the front of the ballroom closest to the stage, where crystal and silver gleamed under spotlight. Past the second-tier tables where CFOs and board members would sit, past the third-tier tables where mid-level executives and their spouses made networking small talk, all the way to the back corner, near the kitchen entrance where staff pushed carts of food and the swinging doors released bursts of heat and cooking smells, near the restrooms where guests would disappear between courses, behind a structural pillar that partially blocked the view of the stage. A small table set for two with a number card that read 47. "Table 47, the hostess said pleasantly. "Enjoy your evening." Walsh stared at the table like it had personally insulted her. "There's been a mistake." The hostess checked her iPad, scrolling with one manicured finger. "No mistake, Mrs. Mason. This is your assigned table." Trevor put a hand on Walsh's arm. "Walsh, let's just sit. I'm a brand ambassador for Radiance and Company." Walsh said, her voice rising slightly, the performance cracking. "I should be seated with the brand's representatives or at minimum with the executive tier. Seating arrangements were personally approved by Chairwoman Ashford." The hostess said, her tone remaining professional but firm. "If you have concerns, you're welcome to address them with her directly." "I will," Walsh snapped. "Where is she?" "She'll be introduced shortly." The hostess smiled once, sharp and final, then walked away. Walsh and Trevor stood frozen for a moment, then slowly sank into their chairs. From my monitor, I could see Walsh's jaw clenched so tight, I was surprised her teeth didn't crack. Trevor looked like he wanted the floor to open and swallow him. The smell of kitchen grease mixed with expensive perfume. The view of the stage was partially blocked by the pillar they'd have to crane their necks to see anything clearly. The worst table in the ballroom, reserved for people who'd been invited out of obligation rather than respect. Social hierarchy made visible. Walsh's hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. "This is disrespectful. When I meet this chairwoman—" "Walsh," Trevor interrupted quietly. "People are staring." And they were. Guests at nearby tables, better tables, glanced over at the couple relegated to table 47, then leaned toward their companions to whisper. I could almost read their lips. Who are they? Why are they seated there? Must have done something to offend the host. Walsh's smile, the one she'd worn for the cameras outside, cracked completely. She tried to reconstruct it, but the edges wouldn't hold. She looked around the ballroom searching for someone she recognized, someone who might pull her out of this humiliation. But every face belonged to a stranger operating at a level she'd never actually reached. On my monitor, I watched her mask shatter in real time. She thought the seating arrangement was an insult, a petty slight from a chairwoman who didn't understand her value. She didn't realize it was tactical. From where she sat, partially hidden but with a clear view to the side, she would have a perfect angle on the screens when they descended from the ceiling. And those screens were about to show her everything. I turned away from the monitors and nodded to David Marshall. "It's time," he spoke into his earpiece. "Chairwoman is ready. Dim the lights and prepare the introduction." I walked toward the ballroom entrance, the constellation heavy and cold against my throat, my reconstructed legs steady in 4-inch heels, my heartbeat slow and controlled. Walsh had arrived expecting salvation. She was about to receive judgment. Before we continue, I need to know, are you still with me on this journey? Drop a comment below if you're watching this far. Here's my question for you. If you discovered your own family member had not only stolen from you, but hidden a terrible secret for over a decade, would you expose them publicly or handle it privately? What would you do in Elena's position? The next part of this story contains the most shocking revelation, yet something that changes everything Elena thought she knew about her family. But remember, this is a fictional dramatization created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real persons or events is purely coincidental. Drop your thoughts below, hit that like button if this story has you hooked, and let's see what Elena discovers next. At exactly 8 o'clock, the lights dimmed. The guests fell silent. The program was beginning. But this wasn't the program Walsh expected. The massive screen above the stage flickered to life, displaying the Ashford Enterprises logo in elegant gold script. A gentle voiceover began, warm, compassionate, the kind of voice used for documentaries about hope and healing. Tonight, we celebrate compassion, integrity, and the values that build lasting legacies. The Ashford Foundation has dedicated decades to uplifting communities, funding medical research, and supporting those who cannot support themselves. Standard charity footage rolled across the screen. Smiling children in new school uniforms, doctors in free clinics, community gardens blooming in formerly vacant lots. The audience settled into their seats. Wine glasses lifted, polite attention given to the obligatory feel-good montage. From table 47, Walsh's shoulders relaxed slightly. Just a normal gala program. Speeches about charity, appeals for donations, networking opportunities during dessert. She could survive this. She'd smile, applaud at the right moments, corner someone influential during the reception. Then the screen glitched. Static crackled across the image. The gentle voiceover cut out mid-sentence. Guests shifted in their seats, confused. Technical difficulties weren't typical at events this expensive. The static cleared. A new image filled the screen, a hospital room. Fluorescent lighting, the steady beep of monitors. It was Trevor's video from 6 months ago. His voice, bright and performative, echoed through the ballroom sound system. "Hey everyone, Trevor here. We're at the hospital visiting Elena Walsh's sister. She's been through so much." The camera panned across a hospital bed. And there I was, bruised, broken, both legs in temporary splints, an IV in my arm, hospital gown hanging off my frame. My face was swollen from crying, my hair matted with sweat, my eyes unfocused from pain medication. I looked like someone barely clinging to consciousness. The ballroom went absolutely still. 400 people stopped breathing at once. At table 47, every drop of blood drained from Walsh's face. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." The video continued. Trevor's voice maintained that awful, cheerful tone. "We just want everyone to know that even though there are differences, Walsh is being incredibly generous, covering medical bills, making sure Elena is comfortable," while the camera zoomed in on my devastated face, making me look deranged, helpless, pathetic. Then the audio shifted. Walsh's voice, recorded during her ICU visit, now synced perfectly with security footage from a different angle cut through the ballroom. "You always got everything. I want you to understand what it feels like to lose it all." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The screen split. On one side, Trevor's sympathetic video painting Walsh as a saint. On the other security footage showing Walsh deliberately moving the call button out of my reach, her expression cold and calculating. New audio played Walsh, speaking to nurse Linda. Her voice clipped and dismissive. "Standard casting is fine. We can't afford expensive surgeries." The nurse's response, "But the doctor recommends reconstructive." Walsh cutting her off, "I'm her medical proxy. Standard casting. Final decision." The screen changed again, displaying official medical records with Walsh's signature authorizing treatment. The document showed 2 treatment paths side-by-side: reconstructive surgery, with titanium rods offering 85% chance of full recovery at $52,000, versus standard casting with less than 15% chance of normal mobility at $12,000. Walsh had chosen the cheaper option and pocketed the $40,000 difference, while sentencing her sister to permanent disability. The numbers hung on the screen like an accusation. Then my voice, pre-recorded, carefully controlled, filled the ballroom. This is the face of betrayal, not from a stranger, from a sister who chose cruelty over care, who saw her sibling helpless and decided that was an opportunity, not a tragedy. The final image filled the screen, me, lying on a rain-soaked sidewalk hospital gown plastered to my body legs, twisted at wrong angles, eyes half closed from hypothermia. The timestamp was clear in the corner, January 26th, 2025, 2:47 p.m. The screen went black. Silence crashed over the ballroom like a physical force. 400 of Chicago's most powerful people sat frozen crystal glasses halfway to lips' dessert forks, suspended in mid-air, every face reflecting the same expression, horror. Then the whispers exploded. That was Walsh Foster. She did that to her own sister. Absolutely monstrous. The hospital video was public. She made herself look like a hero while Walsh shot to her feet chair, scraping loudly against marble. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to grip the edge of the table. "It's edited." Her voice came out too loud, too desperate. "She's lying. That video is spliced together. It's not." But it was her own voice on the recording, her own face in the security footage, medical records with her signature authorizing the cheaper, crippling treatment. Trevor grabbed her arm, trying to pull her back down. "Walsh, sit down," everyone staring. "Turn it off!" Walsh shrieked at no one and everyone. "Turn it off!" But there was nothing left to turn off. The screen stayed black, the lights stayed dim, and 400 guests pulled out their phones not to check messages, but to film Walsh Foster's public meltdown. The people at the table next to theirs physically pushed their chairs back, creating distance. A society matron in diamonds and Chanel leaned toward her companion and said loud enough to carry, "Absolutely vile. Who invites someone like that?" A tech CEO 3 tables over, "Someone call security. Get her out of here." Walsh spun in a circle, searching for an exit, but David Marshall's security team stood at every door, arms crossed, expressions, impassive, blocking any escape route. She was trapped, surrounded by witnesses, caught in the spotlight she'd always craved, finally getting the attention she'd desperately wanted her entire life. Just not the kind she'd imagined. Walsh's eyes darted across the ballroom landing on faces she didn't recognize, people who now knew exactly what she was. The performance she'd maintained for years, the devoted sister, the struggling but gracious woman, the victim of circumstance, had been shredded in front of everyone who mattered in Chicago society. Her phone buzzed, then buzzed again and again. Text messages flooding in from people who'd seen the video, from contacts who were already severing ties from brands, and companies whose PR teams were frantically Googling Walsh Foster scandal. Trevor's phone lit up too. He glanced at the screen and his face went gray. "Walsh," he said quietly. "Radiance just sent an email. They're invoking the morality clause. $15 million due in 30 days for a woman who couldn't afford an Uber home." Walsh looked at the screen where her cruelty had just been displayed, then at the crowd of powerful people who were now filming her disgrace, then at Trevor, whose face showed something that might have been pity or might have been contempt. "This isn't," she started, but her voice cracked. "She's making it look—" "Walsh," Trevor said, and for the first time in their marriage, he sounded like he was seeing her clearly. "It's your voice, your decisions, There's no edit that changes what you did. The whispers grew louder. Phones stayed up. Security stayed positioned at the exits. And the worst part, the part that would haunt Walsh long after this night ended, was that the lights were still dim. The program wasn't over. This was just the opening act. The screen went dark. The entire ballroom held its breath. And then from the top of the grand marble staircase at the ballroom's entrance, a single spotlight ignited. A silhouette appeared at the top of the stairs. A woman in a midnight blue gown that caught the light like liquid silk. At her throat, diamonds, hundreds of them, blazed with refracted light. The constellation. Everyone in that room knew what it was, knew it was worth $8 million, knew it was Radiance and Company's most iconic piece. The announcer's voice, smooth and formal, filled the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, the chairwoman of Ashford Enterprises, Elena Foster." I began my descent. Each step was deliberate, controlled the 4-inch Louboutin striking marble with precise clicks that echoed through the cavernous space. 6 months ago, I couldn't stand without shaking. Now I walked like I'd been born to command rooms like this. The physical therapy, the heel training, the reconstructive surgery that Walsh had tried to deny me, all of it had led to this moment where I could walk down these stairs like a queen approaching her throne. The guests began to understand what they were seeing. Whispers rippled outward from the tables closest to the staircase. "That's her. The woman from the video. She's the chairwoman." Oh my God. I let my gaze sweep across the ballroom as I descended past the front tables, where board members and executives watched with expressions ranging from shock to admiration, past the middle tables where society figures leaned toward each other in frantic whispered speculation, all the way to the back corner where table 47 sat partially hidden behind a pillar. My eyes locked onto Walsh. The recognition hit her like a physical blow. Her face went through a dozen emotions in 3 seconds: confusion, disbelief, dawning horror, and finally a terror so complete it looked like she'd seen her own ghost. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out, just her lips forming the shape of my name, Elena, Elena. She tried to stand, her legs perfectly functional legs that had carried her through life while she'd tried to cripple mine gave out beneath her. She collapsed back into her chair, hands gripping the table edge to keep from sliding to the floor. Trevor sat frozen beside her, his face the color of old newspaper. I reached the bottom of the staircase and crossed to the podium at the center of the stage. 400 faces watched me. I gripped both sides of the podium, felt the solid wood beneath my palms, and let the microphone carry my voice to every corner of the room. Good evening. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I apologize for the unconventional introduction, but transparency is one of Ashford Enterprises' core values, and I wanted all of you to understand why I take morality clauses in our contracts so seriously. I turned my gaze directly toward table 47 toward Walsh, who looked like she might vomit or faint or both. "Ms. Foster, I believe you signed such a contract recently." Walsh's breathing was audible even from this distance, ragged and panicked. Section 8, Clause 4 of your Radiance and Company. Brand ambassadorship agreement stipulates that public harassment or behavior bringing disrepute to the brand results in immediate contract termination and a $15 million liquidated damages. Penalty. I lifted a tablet and the contract appeared on the screen behind me, Walsh's signature clearly visible at the bottom. You signed this agreement on June 3rd. The video you just witnessed was filmed on January 23rd. According to my legal team's assessment, your actions constitute a clear and material breach. Wait! Margaret Ross, the attorney who'd helped draft the morality clause, stepped onto the stage carrying a leather document folder. She handed it to me with a small nod. I opened it, scanned the termination letter, then looked back at Walsh. Effective immediately, your contract is terminated. You have 30 days to remit the $15 million penalty. Failure to comply will result in additional legal action, including garnishment of wages, seizure of assets, and a civil lawsuit for the full amount, plus court costs and attorney fees. Walsh found her voice high and desperate. I don't have $15 million. You know I don't have... Which brings me to another matter. I said, cutting her off with the same cold precision Walsh had once used on me. Phoenix Acquisitions. The screen changed. Loan documents, credit card statements, debt records with Walsh and Trevor's names highlighted in red. Phoenix Acquisitions is a wholly owned subsidiary of Ashford Enterprises. 3 months ago, we purchased $7 million in distressed debt from various creditors who were concerned about default risk. That debt belonged to Walsh Foster and Trevor Mason. Trevor's face went from gray to white. You own our debt. I own every dollar you owe. I confirmed. Every mortgage payment, every credit card balance, every car lease, all purchased at a significant discount from your original creditors, who were very eager to transfer the risk of your financial instability to someone with deeper pockets. New documents appeared on screen. Foreclosure notices, repossession orders, all dated and legally executed. As of 6 o'clock this evening, you are in default on all outstanding obligations. Foreclosure proceedings on your Gold Coast penthouse will begin Monday morning. Vehicle repossession is scheduled for Tuesday. All bank accounts associated with your names have been frozen pending debt collection proceedings. My voice never rose, never wavered. It was surgical, removing pieces of Walsh's life with the same cold efficiency she'd used to try to remove my future. You took away my ability to walk, I said quietly, the microphone carrying my words to every corner of the ballroom. I'm taking away your ability to run. Walsh shot to her feet, the chair clattering backward. You can't do this. Someone stop her. This is illegal. But no one moved to help her. The guests who'd watched the video, who'd seen her cruelty documented in her own voice and her own choices, looked at her with expressions ranging from disgust to cold satisfaction. This wasn't an innocent woman being victimized. This was justice being served with a precision that made it impossible to look away. David Marshall's security team began moving toward table 47, ready to escort Walsh out before she could cause more of a scene. I raised one hand, stopping them mid-step. Wait, I said. There's one more thing. I nodded toward the ballroom's main entrance. The double doors opened. 3 figures stepped through, and even from across the room, their dark blue windbreakers with yellow FBI letters were unmistakable. Agent Cooper led the way, flanked by 2 other agents, their expressions professionally neutral as they walked through the silent ballroom toward table 47. Walsh's scream echoed off the crystal chandeliers, raw and animal, as she finally understood the full scope of what was happening. I hadn't just taken her money. I hadn't just destroyed her reputation. I was taking her freedom. Agent Cooper had warned me weeks ago. Federal arrests are rarely pretty, Miss Ashford. Are you sure you want this to happen at your gala? I'd told him that justice doesn't have to be beautiful. He approached table 47 with 2 other agents flanking him, their movements efficient and professional. The ballroom had gone silent after Walsh's scream, 400 people frozen in their seats, watching federal law enforcement cross the marble floor. Agent Cooper stopped at Walsh's chair. Walsh Foster, you're under arrest for identity theft, wire fraud, and medical abuse under federal statute. He pulled handcuffs from his belt. Walsh stumbled backward, her chair tipping over behind her. This is insane, Elena, tell them. I stepped closer to the podium, my voice carrying through the microphone. I told them everything. I gave them all the evidence. Agent Cooper continued, his tone clinical. You forged your sister's signature to attempt access to inheritance funds, filed fraudulent insurance claims in her name, and committed interstate medical proxy abuse when you tried to access Swiss bank accounts registered to Elena Foster Ashford using falsified power of attorney documents. That's not, she's lying. The agent pulled a folder from his jacket and opened it, displaying documents. We have evidence of the wire transfer attempts, your IP address, your signatures on the fraudulent documents, all authenticated by our forensic accounting team. Trevor stood up so fast his chair fell backward. Walsh, what did you do? Walsh whirled on him, desperation giving way to rage. You filmed that video. You took the money from the GoFundMe. Trevor's face went from shocked to defensive in half a second. You said it was our money. You said Elena had signed everything over, that we were just collecting what was ours. You pathetic. Walsh lunged toward him. You were always pathetic. This is your fault for being too weak to... Trevor Mason. Agent Cooper interrupted, nodding to the second agent. You're also under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and accessory to medical abuse. The second agent moved to cuff Trevor. No, wait. Trevor's voice cracked. She made me do it. She said if I didn't help, she'd divorce me and I'd get nothing. I didn't want to hurt Elena. I swear Walsh kept saying it would be fine, that Elena wouldn't even notice that we'd pay it back. Liar, Walsh screamed. You wanted the money as much as I did. You convinced me to take out those loans. You said we deserved to live like successful people even if we had to fake it. They were screaming in each other's faces now, the performance of their marriage disintegrating in real time. Trevor shaking. I convinced you. You told me your sister was weak and pathetic and didn't deserve Charles's inheritance. You said she'd always gotten everything handed to her, and it was time someone took it away. Because she didn't deserve it. Walsh's voice rose to a shriek. Everything was always about her. She lunged at Trevor, fingers clawed, and it took both agents to pull them apart. They thrashed against the restraints, still screaming accusations and denials at each other, while 400 of Chicago's elite watched the complete destruction of two people who'd built their entire lives on lies. The agents got control cuffing both of them and began escorting them toward the exit. Walsh fought every step, twisting to look back at the ballroom, at me standing on that stage in my $8 million necklace and my midnight blue gown. Elena. Her voice was raw, desperate. I'm your sister. You can't do this to me. We're family. I stepped forward, away from the podium, the microphone still live, so my voice carried to every corner of the room. You stopped being my sister the day you chose cruelty, I said quietly. You stopped being family when you left me in the rain to die. I paused, let that settle, then continued even more softly, but the acoustics were perfect, and everyone heard, and you stopped being human the day you pushed our mother down those stairs. Walsh went absolutely still. The entire ballroom gasped, a collective intake of breath that sounded like wind through trees. You know. Walsh whispered, her voice barely audible but picked up by the microphones the FBI wore for documentation. I found Dad's letter, I said. I know you killed her. I know you've been drowning in guilt for 12 years. And I know you chose to blame me instead of facing yourself. Walsh's legs gave out. The agents had to hold her up as her face crumpled. It was an accident. I didn't mean. She kept saying you were better, kinder. That I needed to learn from you. She wouldn't stop comparing us, and I pushed her and she fell, and I didn't. I never meant. I would have forgiven you for that. I said, and I meant it. My voice stayed steady even though my chest felt like it was cracking open. You were 15 years old and scared, but I will never forgive you for what you did to me, the sister who would have shown you mercy for that terrible mistake. Instead, you tried to destroy me to make yourself feel better about what you'd done. Walsh was sobbing now, full-body sobs that shook her entire frame. Agent Cooper's voice was firm. We need to go, now. Walsh was dragged toward the exit, still crying, her expensive dress dragging on the floor, her perfect updo, falling apart mascara streaking down her face. Trevor followed silently, cuffed his head down, looking like he wanted to disappear into the marble. The doors closed behind them with a heavy final thud. Silence filled the ballroom, the kind of silence that feels like pressure against your eardrums. Then someone started clapping. One person, slow, deliberate applause. Then another person joined. Then another. Within seconds, the applause built to a roar. 400 people rose to their feet, hands striking together in thunderous approval. Not polite charity gala clapping. Real applause. The kind reserved for moments that transcend social niceties and touch something primal about justice and survival. I stood at the podium, tears streaming down my face. They weren't happy tears. They were tears of relief, of grief, of release. 6 months of physical pain and strategic planning and cold calculation had led to this moment, and now that it was here, all I could feel was the weight of what I'd lost lifting off my shoulders. Justice had been served. Walsh would face prison. Trevor would face consequences. The debt would never be repaid, the inheritance would remain protected, and the world would know exactly what my sister had done. But as the applause echoed through the Palmer House, bouncing off crystal chandeliers and gold leaf ceiling, I realized I wasn't crying for Walsh. as she was now the broken, desperate woman who'd just been arrested in front of Chicago's elite. I was crying for the sister I'd lost 12 years ago, the one who died the same day our mother had, the girl who'd pushed in anger and fear and then spent the rest of her life trying to bury the guilt by burying me. That Walsh had been gone long before tonight. I was just finally officially saying goodbye. The newspapers called it the gala that shook Chicago. Social media dissected every moment for weeks. But I stopped reading the coverage after the first few days. I had a company to run. My office occupied the northwest corner of Willis Tower's 68th floor glass walls, offering a panoramic view of Chicago stretching toward Lake Michigan. Early spring sunlight filtered through the windows, turning the city below into a patchwork of gold and shadow. 18 months had passed since the gala, and life had moved forward with the kind of momentum that doesn't wait for you to catch your breath. A typical day now meant back-to-back board meetings, strategic planning sessions, quarterly reviews with department heads, and the 1,000 small decisions required to lead a $2.4 billion enterprise. Charles had been right. I had the skills. I just needed the confidence and the circumstances that forced me to discover them. My desk phone buzzed. Patricia Chen's voice came through. "Miss Ashford, the quarterly reports are ready for your review. Send them in." I spent the next hour analyzing numbers that told a story I was still adjusting to. Ashford Enterprises was thriving under my leadership. Revenue was up 12% from the previous quarter. We'd launched 3 new sustainability initiatives that were already improving both our environmental impact and our public perception. Employee satisfaction scores had reached their highest point in a decade. I wasn't just maintaining Charles's legacy, I was expanding it in directions that felt authentic to who I was becoming. A knock interrupted my concentration. Callahan entered carrying a leather folder, his expression unreadable in that way that meant he was about to deliver information I'd asked for, but might not want to hear. "I thought you'd want the legal updates," he said, setting the folder on my desk. I opened it. Inside were the final court documents sentencing records prison assignments. Walsh Foster convicted on federal charges of wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud. Sentenced to 8 years at FC on Dublin, the Federal Women's Correctional Institution in California. Eligible for parole after 5 years with good behavior. Upon release, she would be banned from returning to Illinois for 15 years. The $15 million judgment from the Radiance contract termination remained in force. She would never be able to pay it. Bankruptcy protection didn't cover punitive damages for intentional harm. Trevor Mason, convicted of conspiracy to commit wire fraud and conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, sentenced to 5 years at FCY Sandstone in Minnesota. He'd filed for divorce from Walsh within 2 weeks of his arrest. It had been granted immediately with no contest from either party. He'd also declared bankruptcy. According to the prison records Callahan had somehow obtained, Trevor was assigned to kitchen duty, earning 12 cents per hour washing dishes. I read through the documents twice, then set them down and stared at the city below. I'd expected to feel satisfaction, vindication. The sweet taste of justice served cold and precise. Instead, I felt tired and empty in a way I hadn't anticipated. "How do you feel?" Callahan asked quietly. "Like I won a battle but lost." I paused, searching for words. "I don't know. A piece of my soul, maybe. Does that sound dramatic?" "That sounds like grief," he said. "You have every right to grieve the sister you wish you'd had, even while holding the one you actually had accountable." I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. He was right. I wasn't mourning Walsh as she was. I was mourning the sister she could have been if she'd made different choices 12 years ago. The charity initiatives, I said, needing to change the subject before the emotion overwhelmed me. "How's the domestic violence shelter funding coming along?" Callahan's expression softened. "You've donated $2 million so far. We're opening 3 new shelters in the Chicago area, one in Logan Square, one on the South Side, one in Aurora. They'll provide housing, legal assistance, job training, and childcare for women escaping abusive situations." He smiled slightly. "You're changing lives, Elena. Real, tangible lives." Charles would approve. I glanced at the 3 photographs I kept on my desk. Charles Ashford, elderly, but with those kind eyes that had seen me when no one else had. Sarah, his daughter, frozen at 31 in a photo taken months before the drunk driver killed her. And a new addition, my mother, Margaret Foster, young and smiling in a picture from before Walsh was born. 3 people who'd believed I was worth something when I couldn't see it myself. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Miss Ashford Sophie Martinez is here for her appointment. Send her in." Sophie entered tentatively dressed professionally in a navy suit that probably represented a significant investment for someone who'd been working retail 3 months ago. I'd hired her as a junior brand coordinator for Radiance & Co. After the gala, impressed by the way she'd maintained her composure and kindness under Walsh's cruelty. "Miss Ashford," she said, stopping a few feet from my desk, "I wanted to thank you again. This opportunity. I know I already thanked you when you hired me, but I'm learning so much and everyone's been so welcoming and Sophie," I interrupted gently, "you earned this position yourself. I didn't give it to you out of pity. I gave it to you because kindness under pressure is rare, and that's exactly the kind of person I want representing our brands." I smiled. "Don't lose that quality. Corporate environments can make people hard. Stay soft where it matters." She nodded, eyes bright, then left with a quiet "thank you" that lingered in the air after the door closed. Alone again, I turned to the windows. The city below moved with its own rhythm cars streaming along Lakeshore Drive, construction cranes pivoting against the skyline, the lake reflecting spring sun like hammered pewter. Chicago was alive and different to my personal drama, continuing its ancient dance of commerce and ambition and survival. And I was part of it now. Not hiding in archives or surviving in hospital beds or planning revenge from a private estate. Living, building, moving forward. The victory I'd achieved didn't feel like I'd imagined it would. There were no fireworks, no moment of pure triumph where everything felt complete and satisfying. Instead, it was quiet. It was waking up each morning without the fear that had shadowed me for 6 months. It was making decisions that affected thousands of employees and knowing I was capable of making them well. It was turning the trauma Walsh had inflicted into something productive: shelters for women who needed safety jobs for people like Sophie, who deserved chances. It was building something good from the ashes of what had burned. I picked up the quarterly reports again, ready to dive into the afternoon's work. Outside, Chicago hummed and glittered and moved relentlessly forward, and so did I. 1 year. That's how long it takes to die and be reborn. I learned this on a January morning at Graceland Cemetery, where endings and beginnings sleep side by side. The day was cold but clear winter sun, turning Chicago's frozen landscape into something austere and beautiful. I drove myself to the cemetery, declining David Marshall's offer to accompany me. "No," I'd said. "This is something I need to do alone." I wore a simple black coat, no designer armor today, just wool and grief, and the steady click of boots on frozen ground as I walked through the cemetery gates. My gait was perfect now, confident, the 4-inch heels I'd trained myself to walk in, replaced by practical flats that didn't slip on ice. I could have worn the heels. I chose not to. That felt like progress, too. The first stop was Charles Ashford's grave. His headstone was elegant granite, understated the way he would have wanted Charles Ashford 1946 to 2025. Builder of legacies. Believer in people. I knelt, wincing slightly as cold seeped through my coat, and placed white roses at the base, his favorite flower, something I'd learned from reading his personal journals after his death. "It's been a year," I said quietly. "I hope I've made you proud. The company's doing well. Revenue's up, employee satisfaction's the highest it's been in decades. We launched that sustainability initiative you'd been planning." I paused, then smiled. "I've been thinking, maybe we should start a scholarship fund for archivists, in your name and Sarah's. History deserves to be preserved." Wind rustled through bare branches overhead. I took that as approval. "Thank you," I whispered, "for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." The second stop was harder. My mother's grave sat in a quieter section of the cemetery beneath an oak tree that must have been beautiful in summer. The headstone was simpler than Charles's Margaret Foster, 1970 to 2013. "Beloved Mother." I sat down on the frozen ground, not caring about the expensive coat, and let the cold anchor me. "Hi, Mom. I'm sorry I haven't visited in so long. Life's been complicated." I took a breath that misted in the January air. "Walsh is in prison. 8 years. I know that would break your heart. But I think you'd understand too. She needed to face consequences. For me, and maybe for herself." I hesitated, then continued. "I found out what happened on those stairs, Dad's letter. Walsh told me you said I was kinder than her. That must have hurt her so much. But Mom, that doesn't excuse what she did. Not to you, not to me." Tears came freezing on my cheeks. "I miss you. I miss the sister Walsh used to be before guilt and jealousy poisoned her. I keep wondering if I'd known about the fight about her guilt. Could I have helped her? Could I have saved both of us?" The wind offered no answer, just the rustle of dead leaves and the distant sound of traffic. I realized then that I'd been asking the wrong question. The past couldn't be changed. Only the future could be chosen. I stood brushed frost from my coat and reached into my pocket. Pulled out something small and cold, Walsh's wedding ring. I'd found it in the evidence box after her arrest, a thin gold band she'd removed before being processed into federal custody. I'd planned to throw it in the Chicago River, a dramatic gesture closure through destruction. But now, standing in front of my mother's grave, I understood that would be giving Walsh power she no longer deserved. "I'm leaving this here," I said, placing the ring at the base of the headstone. "With you. Maybe someday Walsh will visit. Maybe she'll find it. Maybe she'll remember the person you wanted her to be." I stepped back. Or maybe not. Either way, I'm done carrying her weight. I walked back to the car where David waited, engine running, to keep the heat on. He looked up as I approached. "Where to Miss Ashford?" I paused, glancing back at the cemetery one last time. 3 graves lay somewhere in that frozen landscape. Charles, my mother, my father, who died 8 years ago, carrying the weight of Walsh's secret. All the ghosts laid to rest. Then I looked forward. Chicago's skyline rose in the distance, glass and steel catching winter sun. "Anywhere," I said softly, then stronger, "everywhere. I want to see the New York properties next week, then the Paris office. I'm thinking about expanding our sustainable luxury line into Europe." David smiled. "Yes, ma'am." The car rolled forward, tires crunching on gravel, then smooth on pavement as we left the cemetery behind. I watched the city approach through the window. 1 year ago, I'd been broken, betrayed, left to die on a rain-soaked sidewalk with shattered legs and no hope. Today, I was chairwoman of a thriving empire, healed, strong, with a future as unlimited as I chose to make it. The revenge was complete. But more importantly, a life had been rebuilt, not defined by what Walsh had done to me, but by what I'd chosen to become despite her. My phone buzzed. A text from Callahan. "Board approved your scholarship proposal, $10 million endowment for promising archivists. Charles and Sarah would be proud." I smiled and typed back, "We're just getting started." People ask me if I regret it. The gala, the exposure, the arrests. They ask if I feel guilty for destroying my sister. Here's what I know: Walsh destroyed herself. I just stopped enabling her. Justice isn't beautiful. Healing isn't linear. And family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who see your worth when you can't see it yourself. Charles saw it. James saw it. Dr. Weber saw it. Even Sophie, a sales clerk at Hermes, who'd endured Walsh's cruelty with grace, saw it. Walsh couldn't see it because she couldn't see past her own reflection. I spent 12 years trying to make myself small enough that Walsh wouldn't feel threatened, quiet enough she wouldn't feel overshadowed, apologetic enough she might finally love me the way sisters are supposed to love each other. I'm done shrinking. The world is big. My life is mine. And I will not apologize for taking up space in a world that once tried to erase me. The car crossed the Michigan Avenue Bridge, the Chicago River flowing dark and cold beneath us. I looked down at the water where I could have thrown that ring, dramatic, cathartic, the kind of gesture movies are made of. But I hadn't, because freedom doesn't live in grand gestures. It lives in the quiet choice to let go without needing drama to validate the release. Freedom is simply moving forward. My name is Elena Foster. I'm 33 years old. I run a $2.4 billion empire. I survived betrayal, abandonment, and cruelty. and at last I am completely wholly free. And to you listening to this story, remember this: God gave me 3 chances the moment Charles believed in me when I had nothing. The doctors who saved my legs when Walsh tried to take my future, and the strength to choose justice over vengeance when hate could have consumed me. Through God's grace, I learned that survival isn't just about winning, it's about becoming someone worthy of the blessings you've been given. And with God as my witness, I tell you, family betrayal cuts deeper than any stranger's knife, but it doesn't have to define your destiny. Don't be like me. Don't wait until you're broken on a sidewalk to recognize the toxicity around you. Don't mistake blood for loyalty or cruelty for love. I spent 12 years shrinking myself to make Walsh comfortable, and it nearly killed me. Set boundaries early. Choose your mental health over false peace. Walk away from people who celebrate your failures and resent your success, even if they share your last name. Family revenge may feel justified, but it's a poison that burns through everything trust, love, and the version of yourself you used to be. Family betrayal teaches you that DNA doesn't guarantee devotion. I learned both lessons the hard way. Here's my truth. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because they're related to you. You don't owe silence to people who tried to silence you. And you absolutely don't owe loyalty to those who showed you none. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below with your thoughts. Have you experienced family betrayal or considered family revenge? Subscribe to this channel for more stories about survival, justice, and second chances. Thank you for staying with me until the end. A final note. The stories on this channel contain fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If this content isn't for you, please exit now and find something better suited to your preferences. Take care of yourself first, always.